Tori Bovalino. Tori is originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and lives in London with her partner and their very loud cat. Tori loves ghost stories, chai, and dusty old libraries. Her debut novel, The Devil Makes Three, is forthcoming from Page Street in the US or Titan Books in the UK. Tori.
Hello, thanks everybody for coming, and thank you for having us. I've so enjoyed listening to all of the other readings. It's been like quite the interesting afternoon. So I am the author of The Devil Makes Three. It looks like this. It's about two teenagers who discover a book in their high school library and accidentally release a devil when they read it out loud. So I'll be reading from actually chapter 10, which is a little bit far in, but right when they're discovering the book. Right, so without further ado. What are you looking for? Tess asked. Do you know what a grimoire is? She did, and not because she had any personal interest in the occult. The rumors of ghosts in Jessup Library didn't exist just because the library was old and creepy at night. Jessup held a massive collection of occult manuscripts. Grimoires, satanic texts, Wiccan books, voodoo guides, all were accounted for. So Tess had seen more than her fair share of grimoires, magic books containing spells, charms, and instructions on how to summon demons and the like. In fact, it was a running joke for students to find the most graphic spells in the Jessup grimoires and attempt to perform them in their dorm rooms. If any of them worked, Tess was pretty sure she would have heard about it. I do, she said. I saw you requested quite a few already. Elliot nodded. Yes, but they're all too light for my project. Tess thought of commenting on this. After all, if spell books were too light for what he was trying to do, what the hell was he looking for? And also, why was she getting herself involved? If he burnt Jessup down, trying to do some ridiculous, impossible spell, and Tess had something to do with it, she was certainly going to be fired. But there was also a sort of odd, distant curiosity. She didn't believe in magic, not in the same way she believed in ghosts. Perhaps that was because she had never seen magic with her own eyes. At least for ghosts, she could claim the proof of the specters that floated from room to room in her family's farmhouse, cold spots that showed up without warning and vanished a few minutes later. Maybe magic was a bit like that. And maybe, Tess thought dangerously, she wanted to see what Elliot Birch was planning to do, if only to see him fail catastrophically. He ruffled through the pages on his desk, uncovering a slim notebook. Elliot flipped through the pages to a list of crossed-off titles, but no, when he passed it to her, she saw that a few were missing strike-throughs. The Book of Shadows, Death Spells, Secrets of the Undying, the Glencoe Grimoire. Oh, I've definitely seen some of these before, Tess said, in the basement cage. That's what I suspected, Elliot said. So then come with me. She led the way through the lounge and the locked door to the stacks, past the dumbwaiter to the stairs, down to the basement floor. This floor was different from the rest of the stacks, colder, mustier, older too if the rumors she'd heard were true. Jessup was built on top of a university building that had been damaged in a bizarre fire. Casualties unknown. Half of the basement was set aside for the sprawling special collections cage, and the shelves and boxes climbed the walls. She used a smaller key to unlock the cage and pulled open the creaky grated door to let them in. Elliot watched with silent fascination. What? She asked, feeling self-conscious under his gaze. There's just so much protection for these, he said, running a finger down the side of the cage. For books. Tess shrugged. They're dangerous, apparently, she said. Out of the corner of her eye, she barely saw Elliot grimace. He followed her inside. He'd brought the notebook with the titles on it, and they both set to looking for the grimoires. So what exactly is your project on? Tess asked. Elliot's smile thinned to a line, and the fact that she noted it made Tess register that she was spending more time examining his face than she was examining the shelves. As if he had come to the same conclusion, Elliot looked away quickly. I've always been fascinated by the occult, ghosts and witches and magic and all. He was leaving something out, she could tell, but just as she wasn't telling him her secrets, she didn't expect him to tell her his. To her surprise, he continued. This, he said, sweeping a hand toward the books, or maybe the entire library itself. It almost makes folk bearable. He wasn't even pretending to look for the books anymore, so Tess gave the charade up as well and leaned against the shelves with her arms crossed. And it wouldn't be otherwise? Of course not, Elliot said quickly, and that blush immediately crept up his neck to his ears and over his cheeks, as if she was supposed to understand what he was talking about. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. To answer your question, he said, I'm doing my research on death and resurrection in magic. He caught her eye for a moment too long. What the hell? Tess thought, but she had the sense not to say it out loud. And then, am I about to be murdered by Elliot Birch? Well, Tess said, trying not to show her surprise. Elliot seemed like such a practical, unenchanted sort of person, not even close to the type of person who would be interested in something like raising the dead. She'd be less surprised if he said he was studying intergalactic squirrels or something of the like. That sounds like an interesting project. Elliot nodded, but he looked disappointed, like she hadn't said what he'd expected, or like she said exactly what he'd expected. And that was even worse. They lapsed into an awkward bit of silence, moving around looking for the books. Tess could sense Elliot next to her, and she saw him as he reached deep into a shelf, rubbing back to see if he could find anything. Hey, what's... The sound of Elliot's voice was cut off by a bizarre jarring sound, like metal grating against metal or stone, or a mechanical bit that hadn't moved in decades. The sound grew louder, and Tess realized that there was movement too. A bottom section of the shelf between Elliot and her was moving, sinking into the ground and taking the books down with it. The shelf descended until it was flush against the ground, revealing a dark square in the wall. Silence pressed between Elliot and Tess. Tess looked over her shoulder, certain someone had heard the noise and would come running, certain that it was a prank. Finally, breathlessly, Elliot asked, "Was that supposed to happen?" Tess looked between Elliot and the hole. Now that her eyes were adjusting to the darkness within, she could make out stone steps leading down further into the pits of the library. She had no idea what could be down there, and it wasn't like her orientation tour of the stacks had included a discussion of the secret, creepy passageway. No, she said, certain that this was far, far outside of her job description. No, that was not supposed to happen. And that's it. Oh, and I'm also doing a giveaway too, which I completely forgot to mention, of a copy of the book. Thanks, everybody.